January 21st, 1968, Khe Sanh Combat Base, Quang Tri Province, South Vietnam. The night air trembles with distant thunder, not from the sky, but from mortars. In a shallow trench carved into red clay, Corporal David Morales of the U.S. Marines 26th Regiment presses his helmet tight against his head as a shell whistles overhead. The explosion that follows shakes the earth, showering him with dirt and fragments of spent sandbags. For weeks, rumors had spread through the base like wildfire. North Vietnamese army units, not guerrillas, but entire divisions, were closing in. Intelligence estimated nearly 20,000 troops of General Vo Nguyen Zap's elite forces were encircling this lonely outpost near the Laotian border. Khe Sanh, a plateau surrounded by steep jungle hills, now stood as the next focal point of the war. By dawn, the first artillery barrage begins in earnest. Hundreds of 152mm shells rain down, turning the 4-square-kilometer base into a wasteland of smoke, twisted metal, and shredded tents. The ammunition dump erupts, sending a pillar of flame high enough to be seen from Laos. Inside a bunker, Colonel David Lowndes, commander of the Marines at Khe Sanh, studies a flickering radio map. His face, lit by the weak glow of a field lamp, betrays no panic. They want us to break, but we hold. From the hills to the north, NVA spotters call out coordinates. Their artillery roars in answer. Every impact seems to drive Khe Sanh deeper into the ground, yet the Marines dig in, transforming the base into a fortress of trenches and bunkers, refusing to yield an inch. As the siege begins, one truth becomes clear. This isn't just another firefight. This is Job's gamble to recreate Dien Bien Phu, the battle that expelled the French, now aimed at the Americans. And for the men trapped inside Khe Sanh, there will be no retreat, only endurance.
By late January, the hills around Khe Sanh have become silent specters, each ridge concealing an invisible army. Through binoculars, Marines catch flashes of movement, the shimmer of a rifle barrel, a puff of dirt from a mortar tube, the faint outline of trenches spiderwebbing closer each night. The siege has closed like a tightening noose. Corporal Morales, crouched in a forward trench, listens to the endless rhythm, the slow tick of a stopwatch between barrages. The shelling never fully stops. It only pauses, then starts again. "You could time your breathing between the blasts," he writes later in a letter home. At night, the jungle glows red with flares. Every rustle might be an enemy crawling closer. Marines sleep in 2-hour shifts, boots on, rifles resting on their chests. The air smells of gun oil and damp earth. Rats scurry over spent shell casings. Somewhere, a wounded man calls weakly for a corpsman. Overhead, the roar of aircraft slices through the night, the lifeline of Khe Sanh. Operation Niagara begins, a relentless air campaign meant to drown the siege in fire. B-52 Strato fortresses orbit in the clouds, dropping thousands of tons of bombs on suspected NVA positions. Each explosion lights up the horizon like lightning, shaking the bunkers even from miles away. But the NVA are patient. Their trenches creep forward under the cover of night, built by hand, foot by foot. They know the terrain. They fought for every hill and trail in this part of Quang Tri long before the Marines arrived. Inside the command post, Colonel Lowndes receives a message from General Westmoreland in Saigon. Hold Khe Sanh at all costs. To the brass, this is more than a base, it's a symbol. If Khe Sanh falls, the world will see another Dien Bien Phu. And yet, Giap's strategy isn't about taking ground. It's about bleeding the Americans, forcing them to pour men and munitions into a place that no longer matters. The base, isolated and battered, has become both fortress and trap. In the flickering light of burning fuel drums, Morales turns to his comrade, Private Lee, and whispers, "Feels like the whole damn jungle's watching us." He's right. Somewhere beyond the wire, an unseen enemy waits for the perfect moment to strike.
February 5th, 1968. Hill 881 North, west of Khe Sanh. The morning begins with thunder that isn't weather. From the fog-shrouded ridgeline, North Vietnamese mortars scream down onto Marine positions. The shockwaves roll through the red earth, shaking bunkers and knocking helmets from heads. The hills around the base, 881 North, 861, and 558, have become battlegrounds unto themselves. Whoever holds the high ground controls Khe Sanh. Second Lieutenant Alan Chavia, commanding a platoon of Bravo Company, stumbles out of his dugout into the choking haze. "Get those 60s firing," he shouts, voice barely audible over the shriek of incoming rounds. The Marines return fire blindly, their own mortars thudding in reply, the valley echoing with a deadly call and response. Hill 881 is an inferno, trees shredded into splinters, smoke hanging low, mixed with the metallic scent of blood. The NVA attack in waves, disciplined, silent, crawling through the grass until they rise at close range, firing AK-47s and RPGs into the Marine lines. For hours, the two sides trade fire, at distances so close that grenades arc between foxholes. Machine gunners, ears ringing, fire until their barrels glow red. Chavia's men fight with grim efficiency, every shot counted, every magazine precious. One Marine screams for more ammo, another for a corpsman. Above, the radio crackles. Spectre inbound. Moments later, the AC-130 gunship circles overhead, its side cannons unleashing white-hot fury into the jungle slopes. The explosions ripple down the hill, lighting the night like lightning strikes. By dawn, the NVA retreat. Not broken, just withdrawn. Their bodies, carried off in silence, vanish back into the tree line. Marines stand among craters in silence, eyes sunken, uniforms black with soot. In Saigon, reports declare Khe Sanh holding firm. But for the men on Hill 881, there's no victory, only survival. They've repelled one assault, and no more will come. From the observation bunker, Colonel Lones gazes through binoculars at the smoke curling from the hills. "They're testing us," he mutters, "and they're not done." He's right. The siege is only entering its second month, and with each sunrise, the line between defenders and prisoners grows thinner.
February 20th, 1968, Khe Sanh Combat Base. The air above Khe Sanh hums with the sound of engines, a mechanical storm that never ends. Since dawn, waves of aircraft have poured through the gray monsoon clouds. Phantoms, Skyhawks, and B-52 Stratofortresses from as far away as Guam. Operation Niagara is now in full force, the largest concentrated aerial bombardment in the history of the Vietnam War. To the men below, it feels like the world is ending. Each B-52 strike releases a chain of explosions that flatten the jungle and twist the air into shockwaves strong enough to rattle steel beams underground. Marines cheer the distant thunder, calling it Rolling Thunder's angry cousin, but even they know the cost. Entire hillsides turned into scorched clay, vegetation vaporized, the land itself transformed into a cratered moonscape. In the command bunker, a radio operator relays coordinates from spotters on Hill 558. "Enemy movement grid 48 Alpha, heavy," he says. Lones nods to his air liaison officer. Moments later, the horizon erupts in fire. To the north, North Vietnamese trenches continue to inch closer. Their soldiers move at night, carrying ammunition, dragging heavy mortars, whispering commands in soft, clipped tones. They survive the airstrikes by burrowing deep, tunnels, bunkers, spider holes reinforced with logs and earth. Each morning they rise again from the ground like ghosts immune to the sky's wrath. From an observation post, Corporal Morales watches the horizon light up. He can feel the heat from miles away. "That's gotta be killing everything out there," he mutters. The Marine beside him, older, replies quietly, "Everything but them." Despite the onslaught, the NVA's fire never stops. Rockets and artillery crash into the base every day, sometimes every minute. The airstrip, Khe Sanh's only lifeline, becomes a killing ground. C-310 cargo planes trying to land under fire skid across shattered asphalt, pilots praying they can unload supplies before the next barrage hits. Amid the chaos, the men learn to live like moles, eating cold rations underground, emerging only to fight. The world becomes the dirt, the smoke, and the rhythmic pounding of shells. A young Marine writes in his journal, "It's like the earth is breathing in bombs and exhaling fire. You forget what silence sounds like." For every ton of bombs dropped, for every shell fired, Khe Sanh still holds, but no one can say for how long. The Americans believe they're breaking the siege. The North Vietnamese know they're breaking something deeper, American will. And far to the east, in the cities of South Vietnam, another battle is beginning to unfold, one that will steal the world's attention away from this lonely plateau.
January 30th, 1968, across South Vietnam. While the Marines at Khe Sanh brace beneath endless bombardment, the rest of South Vietnam erupts in chaos. On the eve of the Lunar New Year, Tet Mau Tun,
The North Vietnamese and Viet Cong launch a coordinated assault across more than 100 towns and cities. In Saigon, tracer rounds streak through the night like fireflies. In Hue, ancient walls crumble under tank shells. The U.S. Embassy itself becomes a battlefield as guerrillas breach its perimeter. But even amid the confusion, one truth becomes apparent. Khe Sanh was never just a battle, it was bait. General Vo Nguyen Yap's true genius wasn't only in encircling 6,000 Marines in the far north. It was in drawing the eyes of Westmoreland, the Pentagon, and the American press toward a single point, while the real blow struck everywhere else. Inside the underground command post at Khe Sanh, radio transmissions burst with contradictions. Reports of Saigon under attack, Hue fallen, Marines in disbelief. Sir, they hit every city south of here? Colonel Lois lowers his headset, brow furrowed. The siege that wants to find the war is suddenly just one piece of a far larger storm. Meanwhile, in Washington, officials scramble to frame the narrative. General Westmoreland insisted Khe Sanh must not fall. The base has become a symbol of American resolve. President Lyndon Johnson orders a scale model of Khe Sanh built inside the White House Situation Room to track its defense hour by hour. But on the ground, that resolve translates to exhaustion. The men dig deeper. The supply planes risk more. The airstrikes intensify. Yet even as the Marines hold, the wider front collapses into chaos. Cameras from Life and CBS capture the burning streets of Saigon. The footage airs nightly in American living rooms, monks running through smoke, soldiers firing from temple walls, civilians weeping beside bodies wrapped in white sheets. For the first time, the American public sees the war not as distant victory, but as confusion, endless, brutal, unwinnable. Inside his bunker, Morales listens to the static on the field radio and mutters, "So we're the decoy, huh?" No one answers. The siege drones on, relentless, grinding, indifferent. Above Khe Sanh, the B-52s continue their deadly ballet. Below, the red hills tremble. But elsewhere, the illusion of control has already shattered. The Tet Offensive has changed the war forever, and for those still trapped at Khe Sanh, that realization is about to hit home.
March 10, 1968, Khe Sanh Combat Base. The siege has lasted nearly 2.5 months. The landscape that once surrounded the base, forests, hills, and grass, has been obliterated into raw, exposed earth. Craters overlap like scales of a vast, burned beast. The Marines are gaunt, mud-caked, and hollow-eyed, their faces smeared with soot and fatigue. At dawn, a distant rumble echoes through the western valley. This time, it's not artillery, it's armor. Operation Pegasus has begun. The 1st Cavalry Division and the 1st Marine Regiment are advancing from LZ Stud, cutting their way toward Khe Sanh to finally break the encirclement. In the trenches, word spreads fast. Morales can hardly believe it. "Relief columns coming," he whispers, though no one cheers. After 77 days under siege, hope feels like another rumor. Overhead, the sky fills with Huey helicopters ferrying supplies and troops. The airstrip, bombed into ruin weeks earlier, becomes operational again through sheer defiance. Engineers work under fire, dodging rockets as they patch holes with steel plates scavenged from wrecked planes. When the relief columns finally make contact on April 8th, the Marines emerge from their bunkers, blinking in the sunlight. The smell of gunpowder and death lingers, but the sound of engines and human voices cuts through the silence. A few embrace, most simply stare, at the wreckage, at the graves, at the flag still fluttering over the command post. Out of 6,000 defenders, more than 200 are dead and 1,600 wounded. Thousands of North Vietnamese have perished, their trenches and tunnels stretching across the hills like scars on the land. General Westmoreland declares victory. He calls Khe Sanh a symbol of American determination. Newspapers print the same line, though few believe it. The base has survived, yes, but at what cost? Morales walks past the shattered bunkers and counts the names carved into wooden crosses. "We held," he says quietly, "but it doesn't feel like winning." Behind him, bulldozers push wreckage into mass pits. The smell of burning fuel hangs thick in the humid air. The siege is over, but the war and the illusion of control are far from done. Far to the north, the NVA withdraws in silence. They've lost bodies, but won something intangible, the war of perception. Khe Sanh has proven that no matter how much fire the Americans unleash, the enemy can endure and vanish at will. Inside the command bunker, Colonel Lowe's receives the final message from Saigon. Mission accomplished, maintain defensive posture. But when he steps outside into the gray dawn and looks over the cratered valley, the phrase, mission accomplished, sounds hollow, swallowed by the wind that whispers through the empty trenches.
June 1968, Khe Sanh Combat Base. The rains have returned, turning the scarred hills into rivers of red mud. Helicopters still buzz overhead, but their loads have changed. Not ammunition or rations, but crates of equipment, generators, and files. The Marines who bled to hold this ground now watch as bulldozers tear down the very bunkers they built. Just 10 weeks after declaring victory, the United States begins quietly abandoning Khe Sanh. Colonel Lowndes receives the order in coded transmission: evacuate and destroy base assets. Operation Charlie. No speeches, no ceremonies, only silence and disbelief. For months, the name Khe Sanh had filled headlines, a symbol of defiance, endurance, and sacrifice. Now it would vanish. In the humid morning light, Morales and his squad stand at the airstrip, watching engineers set charges beneath radar towers and fuel dumps. "We held this place for 77 days, one Marine mutters, "and now we're blowing it up in an afternoon." The words hang heavy, unchallenged. The demolition begins at noon. Explosions ripple through the base, the same kind of thunder that once came from enemy guns. Smoke columns rise where the mess hall, hospital, and ammo bunkers once stood. The Marines climb aboard helicopters as the ground they fought for disappears into black smoke. From the air, Khe Sanh looks like a ghost, a grid of trenches and bomb craters fading into the jungle mist. Below, North Vietnamese troops are already moving in, reclaiming what the Americans could not hold. In Saigon, reporters question the decision. General Westmoreland insists it's a tactical realignment, but the world sees the truth. America had poured 500,000 tons of bombs, 6,000 Marines, and global attention into this single patch of land, and then walked away. To the Vietnamese, it's proof of endurance. To the Americans, it's a symbol of futility. At Da Nang, Morales writes his final letter before heading home. "We held out so long, I thought this dirt meant something. But maybe the point was never the dirt. Maybe it was to show the world how far a man can be pushed before he breaks." The next morning, Khe Sanh is empty. Only the rain remains, washing over shattered sandbags, broken helmets, and nameless graves. The victory that was meant to turn the tide has dissolved into mud and silence. And across the Pacific, America's faith in the war begins to erode.
Summer 1968, Washington, D.C., and the ghosts of Khe Sanh still echo. In air-conditioned offices half a world away, the men who ordered the battle speak in measured tones. Charts show bomb tonnage, enemy body counts, sortie numbers. To them, Khe Sanh is a statistic, a case study in endurance and air power. But for the men who fought there, it is something else entirely. Proof that firepower cannot conquer will. Television networks replay grainy footage from the siege, Marines ducking under fire, B-52s pounding the hills, medevac choppers lifting off through smoke. Commentators question how a war so rich in technology can be so poor in answers. In bars from Da Nang to Detroit, veterans sit quietly when the name Khe Sanh comes up. Some sip their beer, others look down. It is no longer a word of pride. It is a reminder of promises that dissolved in red dust. In Hanoi, General Giap studies the outcome. His plan worked perfectly. Khe Sanh drew America's might away from the cities long enough for the Tet Offensive to reshape global perception. Though his soldiers suffered immense losses, the political victory was decisive. The United States, for all its fire and steel, had been forced to admit that no hill, no base, no province could ever truly be secured. Months later, President Lyndon Johnson announces he will not seek re-election. Westmoreland is recalled to Washington. Public support for the war collapses. Khe Sanh, once a symbol of defiance, now stands as a monument to futility, an empty plateau reclaimed by jungle. Back in Vietnam, Morales' replacement patrols the ruins. Grass grows through the shattered runways. The wind carries the faint clink of metal, a helmet half buried in clay. The silence feels ancient, like the land itself has closed the wound. If you stand there today, the earth still bears the scars, bomb craters filled with rainwater, faint outlines of trenches beneath tall grass. The locals walk past quietly. They remember. For historians, Khe Sanh marks the moment America began to understand what Diop had known all along. You can win every battle and still lose the war.